The rain fell on Seoul like it always did in autumn. Gray clouds covered the sky and blocked the sun that had not seen in weeks. She walked through the crowded streets with her head down, just like every other human in the city. The tall buildings around her were covered with screens that showed the face of the High Commander who ruled Earth. 30 years ago, they came from the stars. They did not ask for permission. They did not negotiate. They simply arrived with ships that blocked out the sky and weapons that turned entire cities to dust in seconds. Humanity fought back for 3 months. Then they surrendered. There was no other choice. Now humans lived as workers for the Dominion. They built things. They cleaned things. They served their masters and kept their eyes on the ground. Those who looked up too long were taken away. Those who spoke against the were never seen again. Climbed the steps of the administrative tower where she worked. The guards at the door were soldiers, tall creatures with gray skin and 4 arms. Their eyes were black and empty, like holes in the universe. They scanned her identification chip and let her pass without a word. To them, she was nothing, just another human, just another tool. She was a translator, one of the few humans who could speak the language and turn their words into Korean, English, Mandarin, and Spanish for the people of Earth. It was a position of small privilege. She had better food than most. She had a small apartment instead of a shared dormitory, but she was still a slave. They all were. Entered her office and sat at her desk. The walls were white and bare. The window showed the gray city below. She turned on her computer and began her work, translating documents about new labor quotas and relocation orders. Her fingers moved across the keyboard, but her mind was somewhere else. She was thinking about her brother. Was 3 years younger than her. When they were children, he used to follow her everywhere. Everything she did. He wanted to be just like his older sister. When they came, he was only 15 years old. He grew up in the occupation, never knowing what freedom felt like. 5 years ago, they took him for reassignment. That was their word for it, reassignment. It sounded clean and official, but everyone knew what it meant. The asteroid mines in deep space needed workers, human workers, workers who never came back. Remembered the day they took him. She remembered his face as the soldiers dragged him away. He did not scream or cry. He just looked at her with eyes that said he understood, eyes that said goodbye. That night made a promise to herself. She would not cry, she would not beg, she would not waste her energy on grief. Instead, she would do something. She did not know what yet, but she would find a way. And she did. It started small, a message hidden in a translation, a name passed to a friend, a data chip smuggled in her pocket. Learned that they did not watch humans closely. Why would they? Humans were weak. Humans were broken. Humans had accepted their fate. That was their mistake. Over 5 years, built a network. She found other humans who had not given up, engineers who understood technology, pilots who flew ships, soldiers who remembered how to fight. She connected them carefully, one by one, like threading a needle in the dark. Her husband did not know. He was a good man, a kind man. He worked in the food distribution center and came home tired every night. He kissed her forehead and told her that at least they had each other. At least they were alive. He had accepted the world as it was. He did not see any other way. Loved him, but she could not tell him the truth. Not yet. The secret was too dangerous. If they found out, they would kill not just her, but everyone she knew, everyone she loved. So she kept her silence and wore her mask and waited. Today, something was different. The mood in the administrative tower was strange. The officers walked faster than usual. They spoke to each other in low voices. Something was happening. At noon, was called to the main hall. Himself was there, standing on a raised platform. He was larger than the other, with gold markings on his gray skin that showed his high rank. His 4 arms were folded behind his back. His black eyes looked at the crowd of human workers below him with something like amusement. Stood with the other translators and waited. Spoke in the language, his voice deep and cold. The words hit like stones. He announced that Earth would enter full integration with the Dominion. This was presented as an honor, a gift. Humans would finally become true members of the Empire, but understood what it really meant. Full integration meant the end of human languages, the end of human names, the end of human history. Children would be taught only ways. Human books would be burned. Human music would be silenced. In one generation, there would be nothing left of what humanity had been. Felt her heart beating fast in her chest. Around her, the other translators began to whisper. Some of them were crying quietly. Others stared at the ground with dead eyes. Continued speaking. The integration would begin in 3 months. There would be a grand ceremony. All humans would watch as their leaders signed the agreement that would erase them forever. And would translate his words. She would stand before billions of humans and help destroy her own people. That night walked home through the rain. The streets were quiet. The screens on the buildings showed this announcement again and again. People watched with empty faces. They had learned not to feel. Feeling was dangerous. Was waiting for her at home. He had heard the news. His face was pale and sad. They ate dinner in silence. The food tasted like nothing. The apartment felt smaller than usual. Finally spoke. He said that maybe it would not be so bad. Maybe they would treat them better after integration. Maybe their children would have easier lives. Looked at him. She wanted to tell him everything. She wanted to tell him about the network, about the engineers and pilots and soldiers, about the plan that had been forming in her mind for 5 years. But instead, she just smiled and nodded, and said that he was probably right. That night, while slept, sat by the window and looked at the rain. She thought about her brother in the asteroid mines. She thought about her parents who died in the invasion. She thought about all the humans who had suffered and died under rule. She made her decision. In 3 months, she would stand before the cameras. Billions of people would watch her. They would expect her to translate words. They would expect her to help sign away their future. But she would not speak. She would stand in silence. She would let the whole world see that one human refused to help destroy humanity. And maybe, just maybe, her silence would be louder than any words. The rain continued to fall. The city slept and began to plan. 3 months passed like water through fingers. Continued her work at the administrative tower. She translated documents. She attended meetings. She smiled at the officers and kept her eyes on the ground. No one suspected anything. But behind her calm face, she was busy. She sent messages through her network. She told them to watch the ceremony. She told them to be ready. She did not explain what she was planning. She only said that when the moment came, they would know what to do. The night before the ceremony held her hand in bed. He could feel that something was wrong. He asked her if she was scared. She said yes. He asked her if she would be okay. She said she did not know. He kissed her and told her that he loved her. She told him the same. And for a long moment they just lay there in the dark, listening to each other breathe. Almost told him everything. The words were right there on her tongue, but she swallowed them down and closed her eyes. If things went wrong tomorrow, she did not want him to be connected to her. She did not want him to die because of her choices. Morning came too fast. The sun rose over Seoul, and for once the sky was clear. It felt wrong too. The sky should be gray. The world should be crying. She dressed in her translator uniform, a simple gray suit with the symbol on the chest. She looked at herself in the mirror. She looked the same as always, small, quiet, invisible, good. The ceremony was held in the central plaza. Huge screens surrounded the open space so that everyone could see. Cameras floated in the air like metal insects, ready to broadcast to every corner of Earth. Billions of people would watch. In homes and factories and mines and ships, humans would see what happened here today. Took her place on the stage. She stood a few steps behind, ready to translate his words. Her heart was beating so hard she could feel it in her throat. Her hands were cold and wet with sweat. She looked at the crowd below. Thousands of humans stood in the plaza, surrounded by soldiers. Their faces showed nothing. They had learned to hide their feelings, but knew what they were thinking. She knew they were scared and sad and angry. She knew because she felt the same. Stepped forward. The crowd fell silent. The cameras focused on his face. Across Earth, billions of humans watched and waited. He began to speak. His voice was loud and proud. He talked about the honor of integration. He talked about the new future for humanity. He talked about how humans would finally become true members of the Dominion. His words were poison wrapped in silk. Then he paused. He looked at. It was her turn to translate. She stepped forward. The cameras turned to her. She could see her own face on the giant screens around the plaza. Small, quiet, invisible. She opened her mouth. And she said nothing. The seconds stretched like hours. Waited. The crowd waited. The whole world waited, but did not speak. She simply stood there, her hands folded in front of her, her head slightly bowed. His black eyes narrowed. He spoke again, louder this time, his voice sharp with command. He ordered her to translate. Did not move. She did not speak. She just stood in perfect stillness like a statue made of flesh. The crowd began to whisper. The cameras kept recording. On screens across Earth, humans watched a single woman refuse to obey. Stepped toward her, his forearms unfolded, his face twisted with anger. He demanded to know what she was doing. He threatened her with punishment. He promised pain and death. Raised her head and looked directly into the camera. Her eyes were calm. Her face was peaceful. She did not say a word. Struck her. His hand moved fast, catching her across the face with enough force to knock her to the ground. Blood ran from her lip. The crowd gasped. The cameras recorded everything. Slowly stood up. Her legs were shaking. Her face was burning with pain, but she did not cry. She did not beg. She simply returned to her position, folded her hands, and continued her silence. Struck her again and again. Each time she fell. Each time she stood back up. Each time she refused to speak. The ceremony continued for 11 minutes. 11 minutes of shouting. 11 minutes of violence. 11 minutes of one human woman standing in silence while the whole world watched. Finally, ordered his soldiers to take her away. They dragged her from the stage, her blood leaving a trail on the white floor. The ceremony was ruined. The integration announcement was incomplete, and every human on Earth had seen what happened. The news spread like fire. In the factory district of Seoul, a supervisor named watched the broadcast on a small screen in her office. She saw stand up after each blow. She saw the blood and the silence and the refusal to break. And something changed inside her. When her shift started, did not give orders. She simply stood at her station with her hands folded and her head bowed. The workers around her did not understand at first. Then, one by one, they did the same. At the orbital station above Earth, a dock worker named saw the broadcast in the break room. He watched his face on the screen, calm and peaceful even as she bled. When his supervisor called him back to work, put down his tools. He stood in the middle of the dock with his hands folded. He did not move. He did not speak. In a classroom in the Eastern District, a teacher named was forced to show her students the ceremony. It was supposed to teach them about the glory of integration. Instead, they watched silent defiance. When the broadcast ended, closed her textbook. She sat at her desk with her hands folded. The children watched her with wide eyes. Then they folded their hands too. By sunset, the silence had spread to every city on Earth. They did not understand. They knew how to handle rebellion. They knew how to crush armies and break spirits, but this was different. The humans were not fighting. They were not running. They were simply standing still, working but not really working, obeying but not really obeying. The factories fell silent. The docks stopped moving. The schools sat empty of lessons. Millions of humans stood with folded hands and bowed heads, saying nothing, doing nothing, refusing nothing except cooperation. Saw the broadcast at his job in the food center. He watched his wife stand up again and again. He watched her bleed. He watched her refuse to break, and he finally understood. He understood why she came home late sometimes. He understood why she was always tired. He understood why she looked at the sky sometimes like she was waiting for something. His wife was not the quiet, invisible woman he thought he knew. She was a fighter. She had been fighting all along, and now she had started a war without firing a single shot. That night went to the detention center where was being held. He could not get inside. The guards turned him away, but he stood outside in the dark and looked up at the building where his wife was locked away. He did not know if she was alive. He did not know if he would ever see her again, but he knew one thing for certain. He would finish what she started. The silence continued. The world waited, and somewhere in her cell smiled through her bruises. She had lit a match. Now it was time to see if it would start a fire. The cell was small and cold, sat on the hard floor with her back against the wall. Her face was swollen from blows. Her lip was cracked and dry, but her spirit was not broken. Through the tiny window in her door she could hear the guards talking. They were confused and angry. The silence was spreading, and they did not know how to stop it. You cannot punish someone for standing still. You cannot execute someone for not speaking. The humans had found a weapon that they could not fight. Closed her eyes and thought about her network. She had built it carefully over 5 years. Now it was time for them to act. She had given them the signal. The rest was up to them. Outside the detention center, the world was changing. Walked through the dark streets of Seoul. He did not know where to go or what to do. He only knew that he could not sit at home and wait. His wife was in prison. His people were suffering. He had to do something. A hand grabbed his arm and pulled him into an alley, spun around, ready to fight. But the man who faced him was human. He was older, maybe 50, with gray hair and sharp eyes. The man said his name was. He said he knew. He said they needed to talk. They walked through back streets and hidden passages until they reached an old building that looked abandoned. Inside, it was anything but empty. Dozens of people filled the rooms, working at computers and studying maps and building things that did not recognize. Explained everything. He was a military strategist who survived the invasion 30 years ago. He had been hiding ever since, waiting for the right moment. When contacted him 3 years ago, he knew the moment was coming. Listened with growing amazement. His wife had done all this. The quiet woman who cooked dinner and kissed him goodnight had built an entire resistance movement without him knowing. He felt proud and scared and ashamed all at once. Took him to meet the others. There was a young engineer with tired eyes and brilliant hands. She showed what she had been building in secret for 2 years. They had shields that could stop any weapon. Bullets, missiles, even energy beams could not get through. That was why the invasion ended so quickly. Humans had no way to hurt them. But found a weakness. The shields worked by vibrating at a certain frequency. If you hit them with the right sound, a sound too high for human ears to hear, the shields would fail. She had built devices that could produce this sound. Small devices that looked like ordinary tools. Thousands of them, hidden all over Earth. Stared at the small metal objects. They looked so simple, so harmless, but they could change everything. Next introduced him to. She was a communications officer who worked at a broadcast station. For months, she had been quietly corrupting their transmissions. Messages that went to the Dominion fleet were slightly changed. Coordinates were wrong. Reports were delayed. The thought they had perfect communication with their empire. They did not know that a human woman was slowly blinding them. Asked about, was she part of all this planning? Nodded. She was not just part of it. She was the center. Every connection, every plan, every hidden weapon had passed through her hands at some point. She was the spider at the center of a web that stretched across the entire planet. But there was more. His face became serious. He told about the asteroid mines in deep space. He told him about. Knew that name. His brother, the one who was taken 5 years ago, the one they thought was dead. He was not dead. The resistance had found him 2 years ago. He had survived the mines and had built his own network among the workers there. Thousands of human miners, waiting for the signal to rise up. Felt tears in his eyes, had known. She had known her brother was alive. She had been working all this time to save him, to save all of them, and she never said a word. He understood now why she kept her silence. The secret was too big, too dangerous. One wrong word could have destroyed everything. Put a hand on his shoulder. He said that had always planned to tell him when the time was right. She loved him more than anything. That was why she protected him from the truth. Wiped his eyes and straightened his back. He asked what he could do, how he could help. Smiled. He said that was a symbol now. Her face was everywhere. Her silence had woken up humanity, but symbols could not lead armies. They needed someone to organize the people on the surface, someone to turn the silence into action. Was that someone? He was husband. People would follow him because they loved her. He could be the face of the resistance while others did the hidden work. It was a dangerous role. They would hunt him. They would try to kill him, but did not hesitate. He said yes. In orbit above Earth, a pilot named received a coded message on his ship. He was a cargo pilot, one of the few humans allowed to fly vessels. They thought he was loyal. They thought he had accepted his role. They were wrong. Had been waiting for this message for 3 years. He had trained other pilots in secret. He had memorized the weak points of ships. He had planned routes and strategies and escape paths. Now it was time to use them. He sent the message to his people. Get ready. The signal would come soon. Back on Earth, the silence continued, but now it had purpose. It was not just protest anymore. It was preparation. In the factories, workers memorized the locations of power lines and fuel tanks. In the docks, loaders noted which ships carried weapons and which carried supplies. In the schools, teachers quietly passed information to older students who passed it to their parents. They increased their patrols. They arrested anyone who seemed suspicious. They made threats and examples, but the humans had learned patience. They kept their heads down and their hands folded. They waited. Finished the last of her frequency devices. Completed his battle plans. Prepared to cut the communications at the perfect moment. Everything was ready. In her cell, did not know any of this. She only knew that she had done her part. She had shown the world that one person could resist. She had given humanity a reason to hope. The guards came to her cell one night. They dragged her to an interrogation room where was waiting. His black eyes burned with cold fury. He demanded to know who else was involved. He demanded names and locations and plans. He threatened her with pain worse than death. Looked at him with calm eyes. She did not speak. She had not spoken since the ceremony. She would not speak now. Leaned close to her face. He said that her silence meant nothing. He said that humans were weak and would always be slaves. He said that one woman could not change anything. Smiled. It was a small smile, barely visible through her bruised and swollen face. But it was there. She knew something did not know. Her silence was not just one woman's protest. It was a signal, a spark, a beginning. The awakening had started, and soon the fire would follow. The first explosion came from space. In the asteroid belt far from Earth, a mining facility called Station 7 suddenly went dark. The commanders received no warning. One moment, everything was normal. The next moment, the station was in human hands. Stood in the control room of Station 7, with blood on his face and fire in his eyes. He had survived 5 years in the mines. 5 years of darkness and pain and work. 5 years of watching friends die and dreaming of home. Now he was free. He looked at the other miners around him. They were thin and exhausted, but they were smiling. For the first time in years, they were smiling. The plan had worked perfectly. The guards never expected the miners to fight back. They thought the workers were broken and hopeless. They were wrong. Sent the signal to the other stations. Across the asteroid belt, 17 facilities rose up in the same hour. Human workers overpowered their guards, took control of the equipment, and seized the fuel supplies that powered the fleet. The Dominion had lost its fuel. Without it, their ships could not fly, their weapons could not fire, their empire could not function. On Earth, the signal arrived. Received the message in the Resistance bunker. He read the words and closed his eyes for a moment. Then he opened them and gave the order. It was time. Activated the frequency devices. Across Seoul, small machines hidden in buildings and vehicles and street corners began to hum. The sound was too high for human ears, but the shields heard it. And they failed. The first patrol walked into an ambush without even knowing it. Their shields flickered and died. Before they could understand what was happening, human fighters emerged from the shadows and cut them down. The same scene repeated across the city, across the planet. Everywhere that had planted her devices, shields were failing. And everywhere shields failed, humans were ready. Led a group of fighters through the streets of Seoul. He had never held a weapon before the Resistance gave him one. He had never killed anyone. But when he thought of in her cell, when he thought of in the mines, when he thought of 30 years of slavery, his hands were steady. They attacked the communication hub first, said it was the key to everything. If they could cut off communications, the enemy would be blind and confused. The fighting was fierce. Soldiers were strong and fast even without their shields. Saw people die around him, good people, brave people. He wanted to stop and mourn them, but he could not yet. They reached the main control room, shot the lock off the door and burst inside. The technicians barely had time to look up before his team cut them down. Was already there, her fingers flying across the controls. She had left her post at the broadcast station hours ago and made her way to the hub through secret tunnels. Now she was doing what she had trained for. She told to give her 3 minutes. In 3 minutes, every on Earth would lose contact with the Dominion fleet. Every call for help would go nowhere. Every request for reinforcement would disappear into silence. Stood guard at the door while she worked. His heart was pounding. His hands were shaking. But he held his weapon steady and watched the corridor. Soldiers came, and his team fought them off. The minutes felt like hours, but finally shouted that it was done. They were alone. Above Earth, received the signal. He was flying a cargo ship filled with other pilots who had been waiting for this moment. They broke formation. The controllers screamed orders at them, but ignored them. He turned his ship toward the nearest warship and fired. The cargo ships were not built for combat. They were slow and poorly armed. But his pilots knew every weakness in the fleet. They had studied the ships for years, waiting for this chance. The warship's shields were still working in space, but had something special. A larger version of his frequency device built into his cargo bay. He flew close enough to the warship to activate it. The shields flickered, the shields failed. Fired again. This time his shots hit the hull. The warship exploded in a ball of flame. Across Earth's orbit, the same scene repeated. Human pilots in stolen ships attacked the fleet with desperate courage. Many of them died, but they took ships with them. On the ground, the battle raged through the night. Led a team of factory workers against the industrial complex where weapons were stored. Organized the dock workers to seize the landing pads so no ships could escape or land. Guided her students through safe routes to hidden shelters where they could wait out the fighting. By dawn, Seoul was in human hands. Gathered his fighters and headed for the detention center. He had not forgotten why he was fighting. He had not forgotten who was waiting for him. The detention center was heavily guarded. They knew that was important. They knew that humans would try to rescue her. They were ready. But was ready too. He led his team through the back entrance while a larger force attacked the front. The guards were confused, caught between two threats. They did not know which way to turn. Fought his way through corridors and stairwells. He killed more than he could count. His arms were tired. His lungs were burning, but he did not stop. Finally, he reached the cell block. The door was locked with a code he did not know. He was about to try to break it when a voice came from behind him. She had followed him with a small device in her hand. She pressed it against the lock and the door clicked open. Ran inside. The cells were mostly empty. They had moved most prisoners when the fighting started, but one cell at the end was still occupied. He found sitting against the wall just as she had been for weeks. Her face was pale and thin. Her clothes were dirty and torn, but her eyes were bright when she saw him. Opened the cell and fell to his knees beside her. He held her face in his hands and looked at her like he was seeing her for the first time. She spoke. Her voice was rough and weak from weeks of silence, but the words were clear. She told him she knew he would come. She told him she was sorry for not telling him the truth. She told him she loved him. Helped her stand. He put his arm around her and led her out of the cell. When they emerged from the detention center, the sun was rising over Seoul. The city was burning in some places. The sounds of fighting still echoed in the distance, but the streets were filled with humans, free humans, humans who had thrown off their chains and stood tall for the first time in 30 years. Looked at the sky. She took a deep breath of free air. Then she asked about her brother. Smiled. He told her that was alive. He told her that he had led the uprising in the mines. He told her that her plan had worked. Tears ran down his face. She had not cried in years, but now she let herself feel. She let herself hope. She looked at and spoke again. Her voice was stronger now. She said they were not done yet. They were defeated on Earth, but the Dominion was still out there. They would come back. They would try to crush this rebellion like they had crushed so many others. Humanity had won a battle, but the war was just beginning. Nodded, he took her hand and held it tight. Together, they walked into the burning dawn. 3 years passed. 3 years of blood and fire and pain. 3 years of battles that stretched across star systems. 3 years of humanity rising from slavery to become something the galaxy had never seen. The war began on Earth but did not end there. The Dominion controlled 6 galaxies. They had conquered hundreds of species. They had never lost a war. When they heard that humans had rebelled, they laughed. When they sent their first fleet to crush the uprising, they expected victory within days. They were wrong. The first Dominion fleet arrived at Earth expecting to find broken rebels ready to surrender. Instead, they found a wall of ships. Human pilots flying vessels captured from the human engineers who had learned to upgrade those ships with technology they never imagined. Human soldiers who fought with nothing to lose and everything to gain. The fleet was destroyed. The second fleet was larger. It brought more ships and more weapons. It was also destroyed. By the third fleet, the Dominion understood that something had changed. Humans were not like other species. They did not fight for territory or resources. They fought for something deeper, something they could not understand. They fought for freedom. They fought for each other. They fought for the future of their children. Became the commander of the human fleet. He was old and tired, but his mind was sharp as ever. He studied the Dominion's tactics and found their weaknesses. He trained young officers like to lead ships into battle. He turned a scattered rebellion into a real military force. Frequency technology became the foundation of a new defense system. Her devices protected Earth and every human colony from weapons. She trained other engineers to build and improve them. What started as a secret project in a hidden bunker became an industry that armed humanity for war. Returned to Earth as a hero. The miners who followed him became some of the toughest fighters in the human army. They had survived the worst that could give them. Nothing scared them anymore. Led them in battle after battle, always at the front, always fighting for the sister who never gave up on him. And watched it all. She did not lead armies or command fleets. That was not her role, but everyone knew who she was. Everyone knew what she had done. Her face was painted on walls and printed on flags. Her silence had started a revolution. Her name had become a symbol. She spent the war years doing what she had always done. She connected people. She built networks. She found other species suffering under rule and helped them rise up too. One by one, the conquered peoples of the Dominion joined humanity's fight. They called them the Human Alliance. They meant it as an insult, but the humans wore the name with pride. The final battle came in the third year. The Dominion gathered every ship it had left for one massive attack on Earth. They believed that if they could destroy the human, the rebellion would collapse. Met them in the space between Mars and Jupiter. The human fleet was smaller, but it was faster and smarter. For 3 days the battle raged. Ships exploded like stars. Thousands died on both sides. On the third day, led a desperate strike against the Dominion flagship. His small squad broke through the enemy lines and reached the massive ship at the center of the fleet. They used the last of special devices to kill its shields. Then they rammed it. And his crew died in the explosion, but they took the flagship with them. Without their command ship, the Dominion fleet fell into chaos, pressed the attack. By sunset on the third day, it was over. The surrendered. The treaty was signed on Earth, in the ruins of the central plaza where had stood in silence 3 years before. The plaza was rebuilt now, filled with monuments to those who died in the war. But the platform where once stood remained, a reminder of what humanity had overcome. Sat at the negotiation table, she was not a general or a president, but everyone agreed that she should be there. She had started this. She deserved to see it end. Came in chains. His gray skin was pale and his 4 arms were bound. His black eyes had lost their cold pride. He was not a commander anymore. He was a prisoner. He was forced to kneel before the woman he had struck, the woman he had dismissed as nothing, the woman who had brought his empire to its knees with nothing but her silence. Looked at him for a long moment. She could have said many things. She could have mocked him or threatened him or made him suffer. She had earned the right. Instead, she spoke quietly, so only he could hear. She told him that they could have been friends to humanity. They could have learned human languages and understood human culture. They could have built something together. Instead, they chose to conquer. They chose to enslave. They never tried to understand the people they ruled. That was their mistake, and it cost them everything. Said nothing. What could he say? She was right. The treaty was signed. The Dominion was dissolved. They were not destroyed, but they were stripped of their empire. They would have to learn to live as one species among many, not as masters of the galaxy. The species that the Dominion had enslaved were set free. Many of them joined the Human Alliance, which became not an army but a coalition, a partnership of peoples who had suffered together and freed themselves together. Earth became the center of this new coalition, not because humans demanded it, but because other species insisted. They remembered who had started the fire. They remembered who had shown them that one person's courage could change everything. Went home to Seoul within. The city was different now. The screens no longer showed propaganda. The streets were filled with color and music and laughter. Children played in parks that had once been labor camps. Retired from the military and spent his last years teaching at the new academy. Became the head of the Coalition's Science Division. Led the communications network that connected all the free worlds. And returned to their ordinary lives, but they were never forgotten. They were the first ones to stand in silence. They were the beginning. Was given the highest honor the Coalition could offer. His name was written in the stars, literally. A constellation near Earth was named after him. Every night, humans looked up and remembered the pilot who gave his life for freedom. Years passed. The war became history. Children who were born after liberation grew up hearing stories of the dark times. They learned about the occupation and the uprising and the heroes who fought for them. And always at the center of every story, there was the translator who refused to translate, the woman who said nothing and changed everything. When historians wrote about the war, they debated when it truly began. Some said it started when seized the mines. Others said it started when built her first device. Others pointed to 's first battle plan or 's first attack. But those who were there knew the truth. The war began with silence. It began with a single woman standing still while the world watched. It began with her head bowed and her hands folded and her lips closed. It began with her silent defiance. Lived to be very old. She watched her children grow up and have children of their own. She watched the coalition expand to include dozens of species. She watched humanity take its place among the stars. On the last night of her life, held her hand just as he had on that night before the ceremony so many years ago. Sat beside them, his hair gray now, his eyes still fierce. Looked at them and smiled. She told them she was proud, proud of them, proud of humanity, proud of everything they had built together. Then she closed her eyes and let go. The galaxy mourned. Ships flew with black flags. Planets held moments of silence in her memory. The woman who started it all was gone. But her legacy remained. In every classroom where children learned to stand up for what was right. In every council chamber where different species worked together as equals. In every quiet moment when someone refused to accept injustice. Was there her spirit lived on. And humanity, once slaves, now stood among the stars as a free people. Not because they were the strongest but because when it mattered most, one of them had the courage to be silent. One of them dared to defy. And that made all the difference.